Amen. Well, it was 1818 in France. And Louis, a boy of 9, was sitting in his father's workshop. And the father was a harness maker. And the boy loved to watch his father work the leather. "Someday, Father," said Louis, "I want to be a harness maker just like you." "Why not start now?" said his father. And so he took a piece of leather and drew a design on it. "Now, my son," he said, "take the hole puncher and a hammer and follow the design. But be careful that you don't hit your hand." Excited, the boy began to work. But when he hit the hole puncher, it flew out of his hand and pierced his eye. He lost his sight in that eye immediately. And later, he lost his sight in the other eye. Louis was now totally blind. A few years later, Louis was sitting in the family garden when a friend handed him a pine cone. As he ran his sensitive fingers over the pine cone, an idea came to him. And he became enthusiastic and began to create an alphabet of raised dots on a paper so that the blind could feel and interpret what was written. Thus, Louis Braille opened a whole new world for the blind, all because of a terrible tragedy. Folks, we need to understand that we live in a flawed, sin-infested world. Nevertheless, God has a plan. And He is working out that plan despite the tragedies related to the sinful nature of humanity. And so our goal today is to realize that above all of the circumstances of life, God is working out His plan even in the midst of all of the despicable things that may be going on. To better understand what I'm talking about, if you'll turn with me to the book of Genesis. As we continue our study in Genesis, we're in chapter 34 today. And I'll begin reading in verse 1 of chapter 34 in the book of Genesis. "Now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to see the women of the land. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, the prince of the land, saw her, he seized her and lay with her and humiliated her. And his soul was drawn to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. He loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, 'Get me this girl for my wife.' Now Jacob heard that he had defiled his daughter Dinah, but his sons were with the livestock in the field. So Jacob held his peace until they came in. And Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to Jacob to speak with him. The sons of Jacob had come in from the field, and as soon as they heard of it, the men were indignant and very angry, because he had done an outrageous thing in Israel by laying with Jacob's daughter, for such a thing must not be done. But Hamor spoke with them, saying, 'The soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him to be his wife. Make marriages with us. Give your daughters to us, and take our daughters for yourselves. You shall dwell with us, and the land shall be open to you. Dwell and trade in it, and get property in it.' Shechem also said to her father and to her brothers, 'Let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you say to me I will give. Ask me for as great a bride price and gift as you will, and I will give whatever you say to me. Only give me the young woman to be my wife.' The sons of Jacob answered Shechem and to his father Hamor deceitfully, because he had defiled their sister. And they said to him, 'We cannot do this thing, to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised, for that would be a disgrace to us. Only on this condition will we agree with you, that you will become as we are, by every male among you being circumcised. And then we will give our daughters to you, and we will take your daughters to ourselves, and we will dwell with you and become one people. But if you will not listen to us and be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and we will be gone.' Their words pleased Hamor and Hamor's son Shechem. And the young men did not delay to do the thing, because he delighted in Jacob's daughter. Now he was the most honored of all of his father's house. And so Hamor, his son Shechem, came to the gate of the city and spoke to the men of their city, saying, 'These men are at peace with us. Let them dwell in the land and trade in it, for behold, the land is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters as wives, and let us give them our daughters. Only on this condition will the men agree to dwell with us, to become one people, when every male among us is circumcised as they are circumcised. Will not their livestock and their property and all their beasts be ours? Only let us agree with them, and they will dwell with us. And all who went out of the gate of the city and listened to Hamor and his son Shechem, and every male was circumcised, all who went out of the gate of the city. And on the third day, when they were sore, two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and came against the city while it felt secure, and killed all the males. They killed Hamor and his son Shechem with the sword, and took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went away. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain and plundered the city, because they had defiled their sister. And they took the flocks and the herds and their donkeys and whatever was in the city and the field, and all their wealth and all their little ones and their wives. All that was in the houses they captured and plundered. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me by making me stink to the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites. My numbers are few, and if they gather themselves against me and attack me, I shall be destroyed, both I and my household." But they said, "Should he treat our sister like a prostitute?" May God add his blessing to the reading of his word. So here we are. Jacob settles in Shechem. But if you remember last week, he had a conversation with his brother Esau and said, "Hey, I'll meet you in Seir." And if you'll see, I have a map here. Seir is down here in the bottom. I know it's a little blurry there, but if you see that blue long line there, Seir is way down there, and Shechem is way up at the top left there. And so Jacob says to his brother Esau, "Yeah, I'll meet you in Seir." And then he transitions and goes somewhere completely different. So here he is, dwelling in the land with Hamor and Shechem there. And so Dinah ventures in the city to hang out with some of her friends. Just chilling out with some of the girls there. And we read that the prince of the land, Shechem, seizes her and then he humiliates her there. And others versions say by force. But what's in play here is the two had relations before marriage. And so in the culture, Dinah's humiliated. For those of us that are here on Wednesday nights, and as we study the Bible, we know that context is king. And so we remember that as we look at the greater context of a passage, it brings to light really what's in play here. And so clearly Shechem is in love with Dinah. And later on we find out that even after this happens, that she's still hanging out with him over there in the land. But the greater context gives us a real strong indication that this action is more economically motivated than the conversations that are going on there. So Jacob waits to react until his sons come in from the field, and when they find out what happened, the text says that they were indignant. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't usually use that word indignant. So from time to time, I'll look words up maybe in the original language. Sometimes I just look them up in Webster's. And in this case, it's just strong displeasure with what has happened here. But notice here in the text, if you look with me, almost immediately, Hamor goes into this negotiation about how the families can merge, and he's trying to give Israel the idea that he can profit from this discretion that involves his daughter. So Simeon and Levi play along here, and they develop this deception that causes all the males in the city, which by the way is about 1,000 of them, to be debilitated. So they're debilitated, they're in pain, and so the two go in and they commit mass murder as a result of this. And then they plunder everything else, including the women and the children. Friends, this is absolutely despicable. This is despicable behavior. And as we talk about things in the Bible, friends, I remind folks from time to time that there are passages in the Bible that are prescriptive. In other words, as we read them as believers, as Christians, we have a prescription in the text that tells us this is something that we should do. Today, this is more descriptive of what's going on. This is not prescriptive, all right? We don't, whenever somebody wrongs us, we don't have license from God to go out and wipe out them and all of their family and all of the people in their city. this is descriptive of the despicable nature and the heart of man, which is totally depraved. And we see here where these two brothers decide that they're gonna get one over on these people because of what happens. So please know, friends, it's descriptive of what's going on and certainly not prescriptive from God that this is okay. So Israel chastises his son for their treachery, but notice what he doesn't do. He doesn't say, this is wrong, you committed mass murder. What he says is, you've made me stink in the nostrils of all of the people around here. So he's worried about his own skin. He's not worried about the despicable thing that they just did. He's worried about what might happen to him with the treachery. Well, what's really going on here is, the text gives us a real clear indication about a conspiracy that's going on behind the scenes. Go back with me, if you will. Look at verse 21 of chapter 34 with me. It says, these men, Hamor is talking and Shechem is having this conversation. These men are at peace with us. Let them dwell in the land and trade in it, for behold, the land is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters as wives, and let us give them our daughters. Only on this condition will the people and the men agree to dwell with us and become one people. When every male among us is circumcised, and they're circumcised, listen, will not their livestock, their property, and all their beasts be ours? So you see, friends, the idea here is that they think that they can profit from this, and it's an economically motivated situation. But let's look at it from a biblical perspective. What's really at risk here? The covenant. The covenant is at risk. Remember the covenant, the Abrahamic covenant, the covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and now with Jacob, that God is going to be their God, and they're going to be his people. So the covenant is at risk. And that last line affirms the strategy was to strike an economic arrangement that would have resulted in Israel being assimilated into the camp of Hamor and Shechem and their gods. Well, look what happens afterwards. Go over to chapter 35 with me. We'll look at it next week, but I want to kind of give us a foreshadowing here. Look what it says in verse 1, beginning in verse 1 of chapter 35. God said to Jacob, arise and go up to Bethel to dwell there. Make an altar there to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau. So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, listen, put away the foreign gods that are among you and purify yourselves and change your garments. Then let us arise and go up to Bethel so that I may make there an altar to the God who answers me in the day of my distress and has been with me wherever I have gone. So they gave Jacob all their foreign gods that they had and the rings that were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the terebinth tree that was near Shechem. And they journeyed, and as they journeyed, a terror from God fell among the cities that were around them, so that they did not pursue the sons of Jacob. And so Jacob's obedient. He goes to Bethel just like God commands him to do. He puts away the foreign gods. He leaves everything there in the city, and they move away. And as they go, a hedge of protection is placed around Jacob and his family. So the reverse happens. Hamor and Shechem's intentions are to assimilate Israel into them. And ironically, the reverse happens, and they're assimilated into God's chosen people. So our takeaway today, friends, what do we walk away with today? Well, the words of Eleanor Roosevelt ring true. One's philosophy is not best expressed in words. It's expressed in the choices that one makes. In the long run, we shape our lives, we shape ourselves. The process never ends until we die, and the choices that we make are ultimately our responsibility. You know, as we continue to talk about the sovereignty of God, and you see this thread of the sovereignty of God through everything that we've studied, as we continue to look at the Bible, you see that God is in control. And whenever we talk about that, you know, you get this flavor from different folks about, you know, whether it's sovereignty of God or man's free will, and it's both and you see it all in play and playing out harmoniously in everything that we read about in the Bible here. And so you see that different people made different choices. How do we respond, though? What is our response to loss? What is our response to tragedy? What is our response when someone seemingly gets something over on us? As a young man, film director Robert Flaherty spent months in the far north looking for iron ore and cod. And he found neither. But he did shoot 70,000 feet of film in his travels. And someone encouraged him to edit the film and make a documentary, which Flaherty spent weeks doing. But just as he finished, a match from his cigarette dropped among the celluloid, consuming the entire film and burning Flaherty badly. His response to the disaster, what could it have been? What could it have been? Anger. Frustration, giving up. But here's his response. Was a determination to return to the far north and make a film of Eskimo life that people would never forget, he said. And he did just that, and the result of it was that 1922 classic, Nanook of the North. Concerning the tragedy that Israel was facing, he's faced with a choice. How did he respond to the circumstances? Well, immediately, his response was what? Fear. Fear that the actions were going to be devastating to his family, that he was at risk now of being destroyed because of some choices that other people made, right? His sons went in and they mass murdered people. He had no control over that. He didn't know they were going to do it. And so his response is fear, but then his response is obedience, right, to the Lord, and the hedge of protection came, right? What were Simeon and Levi's choices? What was their response? You ever had that heart? You know, someone did you dirt. Someone did something despicable to you or to yours, right? And immediately the desire is to get them back, right? Have you ever known anyone that's gotten somebody back and said, I feel really good about that? You know, every time I hear of that, someone says, you know, I thought that getting them back was going to feel good, but I just don't feel any better. I just don't feel any better. What was Dinah's response? She just continued to hang out with him anyway, even after all of that. In the face of tragedy, in the face of perceived opportunity, how will we respond? What's our reaction to the circumstances of life? Make no mistake, this is a despicable world, friends, and some very, very bad things are happening every day. We hear about them more and more. You know, social media brings it closer to us, and we think sometimes, man, this world is just going in the toilet. But things have always been bad. Man is totally depraved, and evil has always been present ever since the fall. It's a despicable world, and terrible things, unspeakable things happen. Why? Because of sin. Because of sin. Nevertheless, as believers, we can count on God to go about his purposes in our lives. And it brings to mind a passage that I continue to remind us, because it's something that we do need to remember, and it's Romans 8:28 and 29, which says this, and we know that God causes all things to work for good for those who love God, Amen. For those who are called according to his purpose. For those he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed in the likeness of his Son. And so, friends, as we draw the meaning out of that passage, as we look at the text in the way that it's designed to share with us, God is taking all of the circumstances of everything that happens from beginning to end in this time, in this creation, And he's causing it all, whether we perceive it to be good, bad, indifferent, whether it affects us or doesn't affect us. He causes all of it to work for your and my good as believers in order to shape us into the likeness of Jesus Christ. And so, friends, my challenge to us today is to look for the shaping in the things that we perceive to be good and the things that we perceive to be bad, or even the things that we perceive to not affect us at all. And remember this, when it comes to tragedy or when it comes to circumstances where people do us dirt, we cannot control what people think. We cannot control what people say. We cannot control what people do. And we cannot, a lot of times, control the circumstances that surround us. But we can control what we think, what we say, what we do, and how we respond to the circumstances of life. And so, my challenge to us in our daily quiet time is to meditate on that situation, that tragic situation that comes to mind as I talk about circumstances like this, where you felt wronged, or where you felt slighted, or where you felt like it was just not right. Are you carrying that around in a gunny sack? Let it go. Let it go. It's not destroying anyone but you. And remember that the Lord is in charge, and He is omnibenevolent, and His way is the best way. And He's shaping you into the likeness of Jesus Christ for your good. Let's remember that always. Will you pray with me?